So we talk a lot on the podcast about this concept of feeling stuck, right? Feeling like we get into patterns in our lives and we know better. We see ourselves doing that same thing over and over again, but for whatever reason, we just don't know how to pull out from under it. It's very frustrating. I call it a case of the I know betters, and nobody likes a case of the I know betters. They want to be able to change when something is uncomfortable and not serving them anymore, especially when that thing is them. Now, sometimes there's also points in our life where we're just frustrated and irritable and depressed and sad and, all those uncomfortable feelings, right? And we're feeling those things and we're resentful and we're pointing fingers at, it's this that happened and I didn't get these kinds of, graces in my life or have these folks in my life that have really pulled me back. And I'm telling you that even in those contexts, there are things that you are doing that participate in that suffering. Oof, I know that's a hard one to hear. It's true though. And our guest today, JJ Flizanes, is going to talk to us about how to recognize these patterns, how to see when it's us that's actually participating in our own suffering, and how to get out of those holes that we are creating, those big old potholes in the middle of our life that we just keep falling back into. So I hope that you keep listening today because you are going to really enjoy the wisdom that this woman is going to impart for us.
I know your deep, dark secret. You don't like your life. You're a woman in midlife, and for the past 2 decades or more, you've poured yourself in to other people. You've poured yourself into your career, your family, and yet on the inside, you feel broken. And that's no way to be. I'm Dr. Natalie Marr. I'm a clinical psychologist and a life transition expert. It wasn't too long ago that I was in your shoes, waking up in my early 40s, thinking I've got 2 failed marriages and I'm a single mom for the second time in my life. And I just knew that I could do better, that I could feel better. Fortunately for you, I have about 20 years experience clinically. And so I've created a method that will help you learn to love your story. I know that the story that you're telling yourself about your life feels awful. And I know that you think that you can't change that. I assure you, you can. And when we work together, I'm going to help you to craft a different story, a story that you love, a story that makes you want to get up every single day. Let's work together to help you love your story.
Are you on my mailing list yet? Because if you're not, you really should be. You want to join at learntoloveyourstory.com. If you scroll down, I'm giving away a freebie for you. Honestly, you know what it is? A free course. I sell online courses, but this is a course just for you. And it's about freeing yourself, letting go of what others' expectations and ideas are for you. That nagging self-doubt in your head, it's usually fueled by your consideration of what others think of you over your consideration of what you think of you. And so I teach you in my video all about what is underlying that kind of self-doubt and how to get out of that conundrum. And I give you a workbook that goes with it that helps you to build the skill sets that you're going to need for that. So please make sure you're on my mailing list, because at the least, you're going to get a free gift. And at the most, you're going to hear about all the things that we're doing on Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving and learntoloveyourstory.com. And you don't want to be missing out on any of the new things that'll be coming your way.
So as I said in the intro, we have a guest today, and I want to give you a little bit of background on JJ Flizanes. JJ went from a personal trainer to an empowerment strategist, and she's been empowering people in the areas of health, relationships, healing, and business since 2005. She specializes in helping create a roadmap to emotional healing and rewiring core wound patterns with her exclusive core wound mapping. And that's what we're going to get at today. JJ Flizanes wants us to know that from business to personal, understanding patterns and beliefs will help you make decisions that can transform self-sabotage in every area in order to manifest the success you desire. So let's listen to what JJ Flizanes has to say about how we can break these stuck patterns in our lives. Welcome back, everybody, to Midlife Crisis, to a Centered Life Thriving. Today, we have a guest with us. Her name is JJ Flizanes, and what it said on her bio, which attracted me the most, was from personal trainer to empowerment strategist. So I knew she was going to be somebody that we wanted to have on the podcast here to talk to you about how to get out of those unstuck places that kind of bring us down the tunnel of midlife crisis, maybe, instead of the centered life thriving that we're seeking. But thank you for coming today, JJ. Welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Dr. Natalie. I love the whole midlife conversation. I mean, what we're going to talk about really applies to everybody, but there's a very sweet spot in a midlife that has a different perspective and a different focus and intensity on some of these curiosities and questions, and how can I have a better life than I've had up until now, or what do I do now, and how do I fix this? So
yeah. Yes. So I can't wait to dig into that. However, our first question always for our guests is, tell us your story. We would love to hear that.
So what you don't know about me is that could be a very dangerous question, because I could have you here without breathing for several days, not hours, days. So I'd like you to tell me the highlights of what you're looking for through the story, so that I can do sound bites to get us in an appropriate amount of time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I get that. Thank you. And I appreciate it. So I am really curious about what kind of work you do with folks to look at the patterns, understanding our belief systems about ourselves, the stories basically that we tell ourselves that drive us into these self-sabotaging behaviors. Because I definitely see that as a big barrier during midlife for women, is that I don't know if it's a barrier so much as there's an awakening in midlife that comes with this recognition that there's been some self-sabotage for a long time programmed into us. Nothing that we did. Self-sabotage it's a difficult term, because I know that women are going to get self-critical when they hear that, like, oh, here's another thing I'm doing to myself kind of a deal. But it's actually kind of culturally and family and socially programmed into us and conditioned into us to do that. And so that's really what I'd like to dig into today. Sure. So tell us your story as it pertains to that. Like, what got you curious about that? And how did you find yourself on that path?
Well, I was born curious, so we'll just put that one there. I'm a Pisces with a lot of Sag, so truth seeking is a thing.
Oh, I'm a Pisces too. That says a lot.
Well, when my mom said to me the first time, she said, don't do that or stop doing that. And I said, why? And she said, because I said so. And I said, that is not an answer. I must have been like 8. I'm like, no, that's not going to work. I'm sorry. Because I said so is literally not an answer. If you need to tell me why you don't like what I'm doing and why you want me to stop it. Like, I need more information than that, because it's not as simple. You're the boss of me, even though yes, you're my mother, and I guess you'd be the boss of me, but you're really not the boss of me, because I have a brain that's separate than yours. Really? Yeah.
Exactly. So, at 8 years old, though, I mean, that does say a lot about you, that you already had that much individuation at that point.
Pretty early on. I don't even know the first memory, but I definitely know that I questioned her pretty quickly. I mean, in awareness of when you have consciousness, and actually that's something we'll talk about, is core wounds and how these patterns and programs get programmed into your brain, and you don't have anything to do with it. You're just, you're a sieve, you're a sponge, you're taking in information. But so for me, it was really, I mean, I was born, and I was in a family full of Italians, but my dad was Greek, and they were Catholic. But when they got married, my dad couldn't go to CCD classes, so they get married in the Catholic church. My dad asked my mom volunteered because she didn't work, to basically convert and become Orthodox. And then before that, though, I got baptized as an Orthodox Christian. I love Orthodox faith, and I love rituals and all the older sort of traditional faith. and I see the problem with a lot of them. But that to say, I was a minority in my culture. I was a white girl in a Greek, Arabic, Russian environment. And so from the beginning, which was great for me because I loved that. I loved that I was a minority in Pennsylvania in a church full of people who had a background I did not have. And it just felt really fun. Or it felt really cool. But then people I went to school with, they'd go to Lutheran churches, Protestant churches, the Catholic church. And so I'd go with all of them and I just ask questions. I'd say, why do you drink grape juice and we drink wine? Why do you only fast on one day and we fast for 40 days? I just ask questions. Why can you get married and they can't?
Yeah.
And so I've been curious my whole life. So let's establish that. So then let's move to the Pisces in me has always been cares how I feel. How I feel is very important.
Yeah.
Feelings are very important. So if I don't feel good, well, why don't I feel good? Why did I just react that way? Why did that person react that way? So I've always just wondered about how to feel better and when someone doesn't feel better. What I didn't realize when I was younger, because I thought I was really, really a great communicator, if I had my feelings hurt, that's air quotes for anyone listening and not watching this, I'd say when I got my feelings hurt, I was so good at being able to tell someone exactly the way they hurt my feelings and what to stop doing so that it would never happen again. What I would come to learn later is what a big victim that is. I did not realize what a big victim I was until the day that I learned it, which was probably, let's fast forward. I've lived in Pennsylvania. I went to school in New York. I lived in New York City. I moved to California. I started my own business in California. I had my first life coach in California. 2001, she gave me a CD. It was Esther Hicks channeling Abraham. And I heard the words, "You are the creator of your own reality." And I about wrecked my car because I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is really good news because if I don't like something, that means I have the power to change it. And that was pretty life changing right there. And that's when I really understood the power that I had. Now, I got really excited about that idea and I shared that with everybody that would listen. And just like you had just sort of defended those that are listening and misinterpreting what you're saying, I could see that half the people I would say that to would also go, that's great news. I'm the creator of my own reality. And the other half would be like, I didn't ask for this. Don't tell me that I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. How dare you tell me that I created this? I would never have asked for this. And they took it to mean shame and it activated all of those negative feelings inside of somebody. So when I say that, I want you all to know that you have more power than anyone has ever told you you have. You are not allowed to have the kind of power that you have in this world because you've got government, you've got pharmaceutical companies in Western medicine, you've got systems in place that do not want you to know your power because they can't control you. So keeping that in mind, that there is so much more available to us than anyone really uses or activates because you're waiting for someone to tell you how to do it and what to do and that you even have that power. When it comes to manifestation and attraction, law of attraction was something it was life-changing. And I was using it with my clients at the time. I started out as an actor. So again, feelings, right brain. And then I was going to graduate college living in New York City. And I thought, all right, well, I don't want to wait tables. No disrespect. I've done that too. I've run restaurants. I've waited tables. I've been bartender. I've been the hostess. I've done all of it. But I thought I've managed. It's like, I want to do something with my brain. Something inside of me said, you need to like problem solve something. So I went to get a job at the gym. And the gym, I've always taken care of my body, been a dancer my whole life. But I was the kid that had like muscular legs from dancing my entire life and no muscle on the upper body. And I was dating at the time my ex-boyfriend. He was a gymnast. And so he was well built all over the place. And I thought, I'd like a more balanced body. So I go to the gym and I see the trainers and I go, I want to do that. How do I get to do that? So that led me down the path of certifications and learning about science. And it activated in me when I actually learned science. It activated that, I'm actually much smarter than I thought I was. I thought I was just sort of this creative kid that liked to sing and dance and act and learn languages and write poetry and do all the creative stuff. But when my left brain kind of came online with a science that I could get behind because I could see it was mechanical, that I was like, I'm pretty smart. And so, and again, the subject matter is my health and my body. Well, I care about my body and I want to be in good health and I want to look good and I want to feel good. So personal trainer, moved to California, started a personal training company, also acting on the side. But through the years of being in California, and I've got lots of great credentials and magazines and TV shows and all the 9 yards. But with people, I'm constantly learning, and the whole law of attraction piece and the psychological piece, I couldn't ignore, because I can give you the perfect program, but whether you do it or not has nothing to do with the program itself. It has to do with what's going on between your two ears. So what's the motivation?
That's
so
right.
What's the mindset? What's the motivation to even be here? And so from there, I wrote my first book called Fit to Love, and it was based on, because it's called Fit to Love, how to get physically, emotionally, and spiritually fit to attract the love of your life. Now, I had attracted my husband in a couple of weeks through using law of attraction. And that marriage and that relationship was the breeding ground, was the contrast, was the reason, was the motivator and the muse, if you will, for me to learn everything else I'm about to share, because it became like, okay, I've manifested you. Now what? All right. So I understood that relationships were more like, well, once you find the person, now the real work begins. That was my mindset. I'm like, oh, I get it, because we're going to be triggering each other's wounds. We're going to like really learn about ourselves through being with each other, versus most people think, oh, I found the person, I can relax now. No, that's not what happens. No. It's going to grow you, or you're going to leave it. So I took the challenge, and stuff started happening, and I ended up, we ended up in therapy. I threatened divorce pretty quickly on. It was because, anyway, all the story that went with that, many, many years of me seeing a problem and figuring out how to fix it. And it became based on the work of Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt, the work of imago therapy, which is the only relationship therapy I think is worth talking about, where you choose your partners.
I'm not familiar with that.
Life-changing. You choose your partners to heal the wounds of your past.
Well, that's a common theme in different kinds of therapy. I'm not a couples therapist. I've always been an individual therapist when I've been in practice, but that's definitely a real occurrence that happens. I mean, I think Freud coined it reaction formation and psychoanalysis originally. So that concept has been around though longer than him as well.
Okay,
so it's been around.
That was the first time I had heard it, and it's front and center for that kind of therapy, and the exercises and things that have been created in that program are, to me, it felt like an even playing ground. It took blame away. It wasn't victimized. It wasn't saying you have all these issues and it's your fault we're in this situation. No, it says, I attracted you and you attracted me. We equally have things to work out. And I want to follow that path because it feels a lot better than for me to blame you or for you to blame me, why either one of us isn't getting what we want. And so that was 10 years. And I started my podcast to save my marriage. And I'd bring on people like Harville and Helen and Terry Real and, all kinds of people to talk about and to learn, and hoping that he'd hear some of it, because I knew he couldn't hear it from me. And he did listen to some of it. But we had our ups and downs. We had a patch where it got a lot better. And then we got to sort of a breaking point. So that's sort of why. And for me, the breaking point was, or the revelation was, I should say, when we went to imago therapy, like the real imago therapy, for like the last ditch effort to save this marriage. There was a core wound exercise that happened, because imago is you do 12 different exercises. You have to commit to 12 weeks that you're going to be in the program. And there are different exercises that you do during the 12 weeks. And now, mind you, I had already talked about this on my show. I had already explored some of this on my own, but not really. I was kind of waiting to be in relationship to do the work. And I sit down and I do this core wound exercise. And there was a habit that I had with my ex, that I would do this thing, a way of being, and he could say to me, that's not working. And I would 100% agree. I know, I see that it's not working, but I couldn't stop. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It was a habit. It was like an ingrained pattern. It was something that just happened all the night. Even though I was rationalizing, knowing this isn't working. Why do you keep doing this? But I kept doing it. So we do this core wound exercise, and there's a whole, I extract data very quickly from things. Anyway, there's this one page of your of the frustrations and how that plays out. And I started to write the pattern and see that this is how I react, going all the way back to when I was 8 and 10 years old. And I, in that instant, saw my life so clearly that I instantly stopped doing that.
Wow.
And I thought I said to the therapist, why isn't every single person in therapy doing this exercise? I don't care if it's couples therapy. Everyone needs to start here, because this is where you get a diagnosis. of what you're trying to heal. What are my core wounds? Oh, maybe that might be good information for me to know before I go get some help with it. Oh, you're unhappy? Why? Well, here's the core wound that is the bottom line, is the belief that fuels everything you've ever chosen in your entire life. That might be important for someone to know when they're coming into therapy. So I got real passionate about that.
It may be.
Yeah. Right. So that's really where, that's where the personal trainer turned coach. Because while I was already teaching law of attraction, I was already teaching emotional things, I was already teaching certain psychological behavioral things that came with whatever, the way that you look at things. I use astrology as a framework. I use love language as a framework. I use, anyway, all these different tools, right? But the whole core wound thing, and funny enough, I just interviewed Helen and Harville for like the 9th time yesterday as of the recording of this. And it was the first time that I confess that I literally have like 3 programs I've developed around this one exercise. And Harville was like, that's great. I'd love to see it. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it because I want to explain it to you. But because I've created something called a core wound map, which is something like I've taken this one exercise and gone 10 steps deeper and built an entire business around it because I think it's so powerful. It changed my life and I wanted to help others change theirs.
Yes. And I can totally feel that passion through that whole story. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I can see how your consummate curiosity as a child married really well then with those, opportunities, let's say, opportunities in your life when you started to look around and say, I'm a participant in this. And how? And let me stay curious about that, because when I teach self-awareness skills, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, everything should start with getting aware of what the hell is happening. Why am I doing what I'm doing when I'm doing it? Especially when you have I call it a case of I know betters. When you're like watching yourself do something in life and you're like, what the heck? I know exactly where this is going. Why am I still doing this thing? But you just it's like out of body experience. You feel so compelled to just keep in that pattern. So self-awareness, I always have thought is key. But what I am really curious about is once you figured that out, it was like a shift like that. Tell us a little bit more about that. That's pretty profound. Not always when we get self-aware about things is the next thing and then it doesn't ail us as much. So maybe you want to dig into the core wound exercise that you learned and tell us a little bit about why that was such a significant change for you.
Well, as a Pisces with a Sag moon. So Sages are truth seekers. So I saw a truth. Mm-hmm. See, in my mind, the story I had going was this, and you're not happy. You're having a problem. I have a solution. It's in this book. It's part of this thing. If you just read this, you'll understand it and then you'll feel better. But he clearly didn't, that's not what he wanted for me. And again, I understood that, but I didn't know how to stop it. But then when I went back to see that this was predating any marriage, and I went back to before I went to high school and even junior high, that was when I had a different perspective, when I could see the patterns so clearly that it was a wound in me. And this is how I deal with the wound, regardless of who's on the other side of it. Then I was like, okay, I can't unsee that anymore. So as a conscious person who makes decisions and choices about what I'm going to do or say to somebody, it's now something I can't unsee. So I know when it comes up and I go, that's part of my wound. So that's part of my pattern. And it really has nothing to do with the other person. And so that led to this breakdown. And I really had been teaching this as with clients. I've been doing it for years with clients. Ever since I had learned it, I started doing it. 2018, I started doing it. And I have it in my workshops. I would take large groups of people through this exercise. But what I started to see was exactly what you just said. Not everybody responded the same way. Not everybody would have an awareness and change their behavior. So one of the tools I use is astrology, as I have already said, because I'm a Pisces with a Sag moon. So depending on what your moon sign is, how you deal with emotion, you need to know that. Because that's how you're going to process emotion. Not everybody processes emotion the same way. Not everybody values the same thing the same way. So for me, I've always also thought that there's no normal. There's no normal. That's why, and 10 people can look at the same situation and have a completely different reaction because they're interpreting it differently, because their values are different, their experiences are different, their desires are different. All of these different factors that make up why they're responding the way they're responding. I used to think before learning astrology that everyone was just stupid. I mean, it wasn't a very nice thing, but I literally thought, are you just dumb? How are you not reacting the same way I'm reacting to this situation?
Yeah.
But until you understand, which most people don't and never will, because they don't know how to this is where my acting came back into play. I used to have shame about it because I went from like, oh, I was an actress to, oh, I'm a personal trainer to I'm a coach. I'm not getting how this all really comes together until I go, oh yeah, now I know. Because I now believe everyone would benefit from taking an acting class, because when you have to learn how to live in someone else's circumstances, in someone else's body, in another time frame, in another part of the country, in another culture, until you know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes, you have no idea what it's like to have a different opinion about something, to have a different feeling. We're just so used to being in our own situations that we have no perspective. We have no skill sets to do that.
Yes.
And that's important for empathy.
That's a really good point. It is a skill set too. And that's a really good point, because I do think that there are a lot of people that think, well, I do see other people's perspectives, but they don't have the skill set to empathize and really put themselves in other people's perspectives, which is different. They're making assumptions or projections of like, I see this happening in your life, so that must mean this. And yet that's a different thing than what you're talking about. And acting classes was your route into that. I mean, psychology, I guess, was my route into that. But that's a whole set of skills to really put yourself in somebody else's position and try to see the world through their lenses, essentially. Well, that's interesting. I like that.
I think it's a skill set everyone would benefit from learning, because in a Stella Adler situation, because not all acting schools are the same, I learned it at Tisch NYU school when I was on a summer break between freshman and sophomore year of college, and I wasn't learning Stella Adler where I was learning Lee Strasberg, which I don't have very good opinions about that methodology. But when I learned Stella Adler, I learned more about history and psychology in an acting class than I ever did in school. Because it gave me a reason. It gave me a reason to understand what it was like to wake up in the 1940s. What was the music? What was the feel of the country? Was there a war happening? Was there food on the table? What was the environment? That's when you really learn history, because you understand what it was like to live then. It makes it embed into your system, because we think in pictures. We remember in pictures. That's why people don't do very well in school when they're asked to memorize random crap that they have no emotional attachment to. But when you put it in a story, when you put it in a picture, now I can remember it because it's a feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a context. It's like, I mean, it tells you lots of things without a lot of detail in things necessarily, but you can infer detail from that and such. I want to go back to this idea though, that, okay, so you've recognized as you start coaching that not all people are having this awareness aha moment. And one of the things that you use then to recognize that is astrology. Is that what I'm hearing?
One of many. I have a lot of different tools.
One of many. Okay.
Well, how I know everyone's signs of anyone that I work with. I know their chart. Even as a personal trainer, I would do people's charts before working with them, because it showed me how to communicate with them. I got to understand this person is not going to be, they're not going to receive it in this way. They're going to need to receive it in a different way. Because I'd have people where we'd have emotional breakthroughs every time I was there. I'd get tears, I'd get ahas, I'd have a whole energy change with them. And then the next thing I know, they're back there repeating their own patterns. Those people were Virgos. Not to throw all you Virgos under the bus, but this was like a Leo with a Virgo moon, because she was in her habitual nature. It was about, routine, structure. So even though you're having an epiphany and you're seeing things differently, the structure is too safe to break.
Safe. Yeah. Compelling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it takes more than an idea and some tears to change a habit. So it's through years of doing this with people that I've sort of created what I call a core wound map. And it's taking this one exercise and then just like extracting down to very usable, referring back to at all times. Even today with a client right before I got on with you, she's been in a 6-month program with me. We're going on to the 7th month, and I pull out her core wounds every time. I'm like, okay, well, the reason you're acting, I said, just refer back to it. You're reacting this way because this is a pattern, and here's the pattern. We've laid it out, and here's why. And the only way we're going to break this well, not the only way, but one of the ways you're going to break this is you got to face it. We have to stop doing this. So while it's uncomfortable, I understand that, but you understand that this, otherwise we're running from it. It never gets any better. So anyway, it was very exciting to confess to Harville yesterday that I've made this. So, and to have his support on it. He's like, you should write a book about that. I'm like, I am, don't worry. We're getting there.
I am. It's happening.
It's happening. It's just when something is that big. I mean, literally I was, you know, when that happens to you and you learn something that it's life changing. And I sat in that therapy seat and just was like flabbergasted as why every single person in therapy isn't doing this exercise to start before they get there. So, you know, life changing, because I'd been through a couple therapists at that point.
Well, the question it might be, why is not every single therapist looking?
Yeah.
That's a podcast for another day.
I'm sure we can talk about why,
because it is so essential.
Well, it depends on why you're doing this work in the first place. Right. And if you subscribe to the model of, you have, you know, there's a distance here and we're going to spend a lot of time getting to know each other. Well, I'm sorry, you're going to spend a lot of time getting to know me through listening to me. I'm not going to know anything about you. Nothing. But I'm going to trust you because I'm paying you and you are on my insurance plan. So somehow after months and months, maybe, anyway, I don't have a good, I can tell you don't either. There's a lot of really bad.
Well, it's funny because I do believe in talk therapy. And I believe in many modalities of therapy. Somatic therapies, EMDR therapy is something that I use regularly, and it doesn't look anything like talk therapy, but it's very useful for people who have had entrenched traumas. And that's in my clinical practice, not in my coaching business. But I saw on your website when I was doing my homework, one of the first blogs that popped up was like 3 reasons why talk therapy isn't going to work. And I perused through it because it's not wrong. I mean, like, there are a lot of reasons why talk therapy goes badly. And it's usually when, it's not considering kind of what are the motivations. That's the word I heard you say earlier on in the podcast. What are the real motivations for why this is happening, right? And sometimes those motivations are set in motion not by a person's desire or like their intention. It's a motivation that was set in motion by programming, conditioning, trauma, so many things, right? And I also I think that there are personality and temperament types, and you can come at analyzing that from many different directions. And, it does really help. It does really help to counterbalance. Why am I doing this again, Dr. Natalie? Well, let's look at what your programming is. Your programming tells you, do this, be safe, to use the example that you just said of your coaching client. Be safe is winning out over feel better in this area. And so what we have to do is figure out how we're going to, map that out in some way. How are we going to unpack this so that be safe does not always override this? Because when you take the big step back, you're telling me this is not serving you anymore. So we got to reorganize all this. It doesn't mean be safe has to go away, but it does mean it will have to change priority where it revolves around this area that you're trying to change.
Yeah. That program, can we talk about that for a second? The whole program. So the whole core wound programming. So have you talked about that on the show ever, or with?
I don't know if I've called it core wounding, but I've definitely talked about programming and conditioning and how, many of those come from wounds of religion and family and social conditioning, kind of the social currencies that we don't muster up to as it relates to women in midlife, right? Like, we're falling off the social currency with aging and with, our bodies like rejecting us as what we think, but that's not what perimenopause and menopause are, all those things. So yes, I've talked about that concept. I don't think I've named it a core wound here, just because that's I talk about it though in therapy, if I'm being honest.
Good.
Yeah, we talk about it like a core wound.
Good. Well, people don't understand. This is where, again, one of the reasons why I think talk therapy is ineffective mostly. And that doesn't mean that you sound like you use a lot of different tools. That would not be what I consider traditional talk therapy. When you have EMDR as a tool and, and anything else from hypnosis to binaural beats to whatever, meditation, whatever things you're doing to create neuroplasticity, because that's the thing. It's neuroplasticity we're after.
Right.
If you don't create neuroplasticity, nothing changes. You can be very aware of your wounds, very aware of why everybody did what they did, but unless you change your brain, if you do not create neuroplasticity and your actions and behaviors and how you show up, It doesn't matter what you know, because you won't be any different in the same situation. See, to me, my quote is healing is when you're different in the same situation, not you changing situations. Oh, I'm unhappy. I'm going to get divorced. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to move out of here. Okay, well, you took you with you. So guess what? You're going to be creating that same situation. They're going to be different players in different costumes, but it's going to happen again because you take your wounds with you. So our core wound is basically all of the programs. But we can identify several of them, and I sort of focus on like the top three, because I think the top three is enough.
Go for it.
Well, no, I mean the top three in each person, not like there are top three core wounds we all share. There's probably 20 or 30 that we all share, but for each person, it's going to be different. Like my brother and I are going to have very different core wounds from our same upbringing, mostly because I caused some of his wounds.
Totally.
But with my parents, the way we interpreted things is going to be very different. So we're going to have different ways of having that wound. So most people don't understand sort of that so from 3 months before you're born until you're 7, that your brain is really only having delta waves and theta waves. So there's no consciousness. There's no consciousness in the brain. So a kid can't see something and then observe and decipher and decide how to feel about it or what it means. It just gets recorded. The brain is in hypnosis. Theta is hypnosis state. And so you're just being hypnotized by life and figuring out how to survive in this family, and how do I get my needs met. And if your parents leave you crying for too long, your brain goes, I've been abandoned. I've been ignored. I'm not important. I've been neglected. And this stuff we don't have choice over. It gets rooted in that subconscious mind, and they become our beliefs. And from that point on, after 8, that's why to me, talking about anything about what happened yesterday is freaking irrelevant, because until I understand where it comes from, it came from a wound. The reason why I have reacted to the situation yesterday is because of my wound from the time I was born until 7. Unless there's a trauma, in between 7 to adult, there's of course ways to get PTSD and trauma, of course. But I'm talking about the basis of the core wounds.
Yes.
So to me, that was where this whole idea became like, because I've seen people in therapy for years and years that don't change their behavior at all, that tell the same story, that react the same way. And it's because we're not dealing with what the wound is. And it's always in victim blame of other people. So again, I'm very passionate about empowering people to not be victims and realize that no matter what you believe about how you got here, and if this is your first time here, your 10th time here, you're never coming back, that you still have a choice of deciding if you're going to be in a victim state, that things just happen and you have nothing to do with them, which you can choose. Everyone is free to choose that, but it is not going to ever turn out well for you, because you will always feel powerless and depressed and anxious because you have no power. If you flip to the other side, even if you don't know how to do it, and say, I'm going to take responsibility for everything I could possibly think of, from the place of, what can I do about it? Not because you create it and you're a bad person, there's judgment and you deserved it, I'm not good enough to get anything better. None of that. Just from the place of, what is my part in this? Whether it be a frequency, a belief, a habit or pattern. Of course, nobody wants bad things to happen to them. But at some point, if you're the common denominator, you can't keep looking around saying, well, this stuff just keeps happening. Well, it happens for a reason. And that's where quantum physics and law of attraction come in, which is why I learned that first. Right. But it's understanding, but all the rest of it kind of breaks down why somebody says, oh, I tried, law of attraction doesn't work. Well, first of all, it's always working all day long, every day, whether you know it or not. You attract everything good and bad to you. But if you want something you don't have and something you've never have, you attract what you are, not what you want. So you have to grow into what you want. That means you have to expand and change. That means you have to heal and grow. And in order to get the thing that you don't want, or get the thing that you want, because it's different than what you're currently getting right now, right? So that's how this kind of all sort of married together. I took my sort of physical body, energy sources, chakras, all the things about energy in the body, and then just fine-tuned the sciences and went to quantum physics, which to me is the master of all, because everything is under the umbrella of quantum physics. And just get really passionate about fixing stuff. I like to fix stuff. I want people to get what they want. I want them to be happy and get out of their own frickin' way.
Yes. And get out of their own way, which is really ultimately, I just love this conversation, because that really is what I see most for women in midlife. And I mean, what we could say is, what you're hitting is this point where those programs are no longer going to work. The core wounds and the way that you responded or learned and developed habitual responses no longer is going to meet your needs anymore. That life changed enough in significant ways that those are just not going to be able to be leveraged anymore. And on top of that, you're exhausted. Like by the time we get here, we're just like, and I mean, it's not for not trying to put effort into using these old patterns of behavior. It's just that they're not going to get us where we want to be. And we're, getting a little fed up with that. And there is some neurobiology that goes along with that. So as we're going through perimenopause and menopause, it's one of the third times that our brain is pruning at an outrageous rate. And those are menstruation, if you childbear, and then perimenopause. And it's because such a large part of the human brain evolved for survival through reproduction. And so it's not just our brains that do that, it's male brains as well. But for the female brain, those are the 3 times that we have those major changes. And of course, it's changing from needing to be a reproductive being into the next phase. And the next phase, like, we don't need to care about what other people think quite as much. It's actually pruning for leadership and for wisdom to be passed on. And, we were the hunter-gatherers that kept everybody living when the hunters didn't actually bring back anything from the hunt. We had gathered and foraged and let the women take care of the little ones and raise the bigger ones. And so there's an evolutionary reason why our brain goes through this and just is tired and done and over it. But the old patterns, if those are the only things you're leaning into, and depending on where those core wounds are, how many of them that you have, you might be in a midlife crisis side of things instead of more towards that centered life thriving. But it's possible to the thing you said earlier, neuroplasticity, that's really what it's at. You gotta be able to figure out a way to manifest the life that you want to be living, design the life that you want to be living through taking your conscious awareness and moving the direction someplace else, moving that needle someplace else. But you got to know what those motivating factors are in order to remap that. Otherwise, it'll just subconsciously keep pulling you back through to the old ways of doing things.
Yeah. Well, I also think there's another reason why people go through midlife crisis, especially women, is because there's such a huge self-identification around being a mother or being a wife. And so when your children are grown, then you go, well, who am I? And I've seen this over and over again with clients when I was a personal trainer, that I would get men whose wives or new girlfriends or new wives, their children have been married, they now move out of the house, they're bored, they want to go buy another house, like they're clingy, they're depressed, they're anxious because they don't know who they are. And unfortunately, that is something that a woman doesn't feel they have the luxury to do as a mom. So depending on when you got married, when you had children, like taking time to figure out who you are. And I know it's a man thing mostly, but I think it's everybody now. I think the consciousness of where we're at in this evolution, in this expansion of life, is that women want to feel as on purpose as a man does. And if you don't know what your purpose is besides being a mom and being a wife, and even if you have a job, I have a client right now, and she's not even in her 40s yet, yesterday, and one of my groups, we do all my very intimate groups, we do Marco Polo, which is a video app, and that's where most of the magic happens in the coaching, because they'll come on when they're triggered or whatever, or when they're having an aha moment. And she said, JJ, what did she say? She said, I wasn't in the present moment today, and the horse and this guy didn't even know, the universe gave me a message, and my boyfriend said it, so I'd like your opinion. And I gave her this, I just vomited all of the stuff that I thought about her. And I said, and I felt pretty right on about it, but I said, but if it doesn't land for you, just get rid of it. And she came on crying, and she's like, no, you hit it right in the head. And basically what I said was, you are not using your gifts and talents in the world. You stay in the past and in anxiety and in disconnection because you literally have no direction about where you're going, because you are doing a job that you shouldn't be doing. You are so much smarter, so much more talented than what you're choosing to do with your time. You have nothing you're looking forward to. There's no planning of where am I going. There's no picture in my brain of what my life looks like 5-10 years from now. So you get stuck. And you know why? Because it gives you something to do. You want to go into your wounds. You want to go into your past. You want to be disconnected. You want to make up a problem. And not that she's making up a problem. She's got plenty of trauma. But you keep pulling it forward because it literally gives you something to focus on, because there's literally nothing else to focus on. And that would be what I consider the works of Gay Hendricks, wrote a book called The Big Leap. And I told her, I said, we don't cover that in the program you're in right now, but I recommend get the book, read the book, because you need to know what your zone of genius is and try to inch towards it, because every day you are not living the life you are here to live. You are in suppression and repression. And anytime you're repressing, you're going to be depressed. So and that's why you're going to find something to focus on, because you're bored and you're sad and you're not excited about life. So I think that's a big piece of midlife for people, is understanding this is the time of my life. We have like these rules of what I should feel, what I should be doing, what life should be like. And it all comes back to, well, what have I done and who am I and what do I want? Have I ever asked that question? What do I want and how do I get those needs met? And that all can come together.
So do you think there's a core wound that leads to that? Here's a question for you then, because I do think there's some programming and conditioning of women culturally, socially, that gears us towards things like caregiving jobs and caregiving in homes, being wives and being mothers. And I think it's part of whatever core wound motivates us to get that gold star, then lets us down heavily once we hit midlife. You're right. As we transition and maybe we were moms and so we're empty nesting. Maybe we weren't moms and we're reckoning with that piece. Like, oh, did I somehow not do my womanly duty and now I can't have kids or won't be able to have kids in the same capacity? Do you think there's a core wound that feeds that, or several? I'm just curious.
Well, I think culturally, I'll agree that culturally women have performed for love maybe more than men have. So the whole, and that's not a wound, that's the map is in 3 parts, and the first part is the circuit and understanding the trigger and the circuit that the brain goes through when your subconscious interprets the wound. So let's say, for instance, that the wound is devalued. So I have a core wound of devalued. So if my core wound of devalued gets triggered, then automatically, right, my brain I'll have because it's so fast that it happens, right? The trigger, because it's subconscious, the trigger happens, and then I have an emotion that's usually the same emotion every time that gets triggered, and then I have a reaction, and that reaction is normally the same reaction I have every single time. And so it usually goes bam, 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 and it's really fast. And I want people to understand what the trigger circuit looks like. So as we start to get more conscious about it, we can be an observer of it, and then at some point catch it, either when you're in the behavior and change it, or before you get to the behavior and make a different choice. But the awareness of it can help us understand what's happening. So we don't think, right? Because my brother's an Aries and we're very different. I'm an old soul. He's definitely a young soul and a new soul. And how I define the difference between the two of us is that I've had this sort of perspective as an old soul, if you will, that's able to observe. I do it all the time. And I obviously could do it when I was younger, when I would just ask myself, why did you feel that way? Why did that person feel that way? Like asking those questions. As an Aries, and this isn't all traditional Aries, because again, it's dependent on your moon, but Aries are the first of the signs. So they're the pioneers, but they're the infants. So it means you don't have the same amount of layers of depth and to go through to figure something out. So if someone has a thought, it's the thought that who made that quote that says, don't believe, the Wayne Dyer, don't believe every thought you think, or something, or but it
might be,
but it's like
it might be Wayne Dyer that said that. That's a Wayne Dyer kind of
but
thing.
It's the fact don't believe your thoughts, because you have a thought and you think it's true, and it's not necessarily true. It's probably
not always,
not even true most of the time, right? It's probably wrong most of the time. It's an assumption. It's a habit. It's a behavior. It's a pattern. But it's when something happens, he has a reaction, and then he believes that is exactly the way, like we talked about in the beginning. Like, this is exactly the truth. The truth is that this happened, and whatever I thought about it and felt about it is reality. But we know that's not reality. That was your interpretation. That was your reality in that moment. But someone else would have interpreted that differently. Right. So it's understanding where are you on that scale of how conscious are you of your behavior. So I think that devalued is a big one. Right. But anyway, that the behavior at the end of that circuit. So we've got core wound, emotion, and then behavior. And the behavior for a lot of women is to perform for love. Men do it too, but it perform for love.
Men do it too, but you're right. That and devalued would definitely, in my mind, would tie to that quite well, because it's one of the ways, at least in Western culture, American culture for sure, that women are given lots of powerful messaging around your worthiness. If you hustle this way and work for love, you'll get repaid. You'll get repaid. So if you're feeling unvalued or not good enough or less than in some capacity, if that's where that core wound is, it's a shiny gold toy that you can work towards pretty quickly, because it's going to be shoveled down your throat in many different ways in our culture, that this is how women can get worthiness here.
Well, nurturing is giving love, but it's when we give love in hopes that, or in exchange for, like, how many women, it happens so often, how many women do things like they're people pleasers. They think that's a good thing. I'm a people pleaser, and they go, oh, but I'm a people pleaser, I can't do that. I go, well, people pleasing is manipulative. You're a manipulator. Let me tell you why. Because you think you control how other people think of you. All you're controlling is temporarily, like you're literally a monkey, or you're in the hamster wheel until you get a smile, a word of affirmation. You get something in that moment that lets you know they've received you, but you turn around and walk away. They can think anything else and act any other way. Like, it's an illusion that you think you are just being a nice person. You are being manipulative to try to control how other people think of you so you feel safe. But they'll wear it like a badge of honor. I'm a people pleaser. I'm a nice person. No, you're actually a martyr who thinks that if I control and manipulate everybody, that, like, you don't, that's not you being a good example of boundaries and of self-worth and of self-respect. That's saying, I'm waiting for you to tell me how valuable or worthy I am because I don't know my own worth. And so I'm going to seek it outside of myself.
Right.
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 So I think there's a lot.
No, completely.
Yeah, there's a lot of this being unpacked, in whether it be cultural, religion, biological, biochemical, your endocrine system. And then, of course, there's just the regular good old wounds that we have. But I think when we're so busy mothering or working, and married or not, proving our worth until we're hitting midlife, we're so busy working so hard to try to get this love and respect from other people, to love and respect ourselves, that I think the crisis comes when we recognize that either it's not working, it's not enough, or, like you said, you're tired, and now there's space and a more important reason to say, maybe it's time to explore this. Maybe it's time, like you said, these things aren't working for me any longer. Maybe it's time for me to figure out why they're not working, because the ways I'm being produced me up until this point, but I don't want life to continue like this. I want it to be different.
Yeah. Of course. Cause it's just, I don't know. It's exhausting is the word that keeps coming to mind, but being on that hamster wheel just doesn't feel good in any way, shape, or form. So before we close today, do you have any wisdom that you would impart on women in midlife that are feeling stuck, feeling like they more are on the side of midlife crisis than maybe a centered life thriving?
Well, it's all fixable. That's what I tell you. It's all fixable.
I like it.
So you're the creator of your own reality. Learn something. I think get some help. It's all fixable. I promise. Every single freaking part of it. And I'll give you an Abraham quote that I love to share because I think it's the crux of law of attraction. And if you understand this and you get this, it can really simplify sort of all the conversations that we have. So not you and I just mean in what we want out of life or why I'm not getting it. So the only reason you want what you want more money, you want a partner, you want children, you want ease, whatever. The only reason why you want what you want is because you think you'll feel better when you have it. That's why everything in life is about feeling. Everything you do is about how you want to feel. But here's the trick. You have to feel it before you can get it. And when you feel it, you don't even need it. Because you're getting to the end before that's like law of attraction doesn't work. You can't wait.
There's no means. Yes.
So think about whatever it is that you want. How do I think I'm going to feel when I get it? I'm going to feel ease. Great. Guess what? Access ease right now. Practice ease right now. Because if you practice ease right now and you can feel ease and you can milk feeling ease, I promise you will attract something even better than the thing that you wanted. Because you're already there. You're in the frequency of ease. That's the only reason why you want it anyway, is because you want to feel better.
Right. Exactly. I love that, because it takes off the middleman, so to speak. And then you don't have to have a means to get to that end. You're you're living in it, right? You said another thing. Well, you've said multiple things today that have been just wonderful. And I know my audience is just going to love them. But one other thing that I wanted to come back to, because I think that this is just exactly what I want us to end with, that the work you do, and which is not unlike the work I do, is to help people love the life that they're in right now, not be in pursuit of something like, I got to fix this so it feels better there. You want them to stay in the things that they're in, stress and all, but love it in the life that they're in. I think that that's a powerful mind shift, right? We have to kind of shift our way of thinking to, help women, well, for my audience, help women in midlife really understand there's ways to love the life that you're already in, stress and all. And that's the real juice of it. If we can figure that out, it really doesn't, the next thing will be easy for you to love because you've already got the skills of loving the life you're here with. And so then the next thing is going to be the same and the next thing is going to be the same, instead of the hamster wheel idea of there's like a carrot out in front of us that we keep chasing. And here isn't ever enough. Like, that's really where we're falling the flattest, I think.
You have to make peace with where you are before where you are can change.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to stay there, but you have to make peace with where you are before where you are can change. And if you're dependent on your circumstances, that's another law of attraction principle, that if you're waiting for your circumstances to give you your happiness, again, you're a victim to your circumstance. The whole point of this game is to understand how to create the life that you want internally, emotionally, frequency before it can manifest into physical reality anyway. And again, like I said, the only reason why you want it is because you think you're going to feel better when you have it. So just skip the middle step and practice feeling the feelings that you want to have, and your life will shift. One more quote from Wayne Dyer: when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. You can be empowered. You can change your life. You have the power, and you're here. If you're listening to the show, you're halfway there. You're halfway there. Now
you're halfway there.
Now it's just taking the next step, whatever the next right step is for you, and figure, you don't have to make big leaps yet. Just make one little step. And there's a ton of ways to do that. There was a whole thing I could have taught, but we weren't talking about that, about the feelings and needs list, but maybe we'll do another show to talk about that. But
maybe we'll do another show. I would love to have you on again. This was really great. And I'm sure definitely needed by, anybody that's going to listen. Look at you.
It's like a download, and it's 3 questions you ask yourself, and it's literally to problem solve anything you're dealing with. Forget your core wounds, forget any of the systems. It's like the bottom line of your feelings and your needs in this red hot moment, and how to get your needs met and empower yourself. So you're halfway here, guys. You're doing a great job. Just, take action and trust that you have to believe in your healing, you have to believe in your growth, and you have to want it. And just, I'm here to tell you can get it. Just have to take that next step, whatever that is for you.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast. I'm going to listen. I'm going to re-listen to this one myself, because this was just amazing. It was such a fun conversation to be having with you, JJ, but you have imparted tons of wisdom for us today. So I will make sure that my listeners can find you in all the places you want them to. But is there any place you want me to send them to in particular?
My flagship podcast is called Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. And everything can be found at jjflizanes.com, jjflizanes.com. Everything is there. There's free classes, there's podcasts, there's all kinds of stuff. Anyway, and everything is there.
And wonderful stuff. Like I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole with some of your blogs, and great stuff there. So please be sure to click on that in the notes and check out JJ Flizanes and all of the stuff that she has to offer you. Thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Natalie.
Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care.
So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these two crisis resources. They're available to anybody.
Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone,
text HOME, home, to 741-741.
to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast. And I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.